Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, Getting Started with Sumo Free. We have a great crowd on the webinar today, and in these 30 minutes, our goal is to help get you up and running on Sumo Logic Free so you can start seeing immediate value. My name is Praveen Rana, and I'm from Sumo Logic's marketing team. I'm joined by Ben Newton from our sales engineering team. Before we begin, some housekeeping items. We will be recording today's webinar, and we'll send everyone a link to the archive when it is posted to the website. Also, we aim for this session to be interactive, so please do ask questions in the Q&A window as we go along. We'll either answer them during the course of the presentation and demo, or during the Q&A session at the end. Lastly, if you have any technical difficulty, please send a chat to host and presenters in the chat window of WebEx. That all said, let's get started. We'll cover several topics during our 30-minute webinar today. I will start with an overview of Sumo Logic's value proposition, followed by a high-level overview of our deployment architecture. After that, we'll jump into the product itself, where Ben will show you how to install a collector, how to add a data source and send data to Sumo Logic, how to use product functionality such as search and analysis, saving searches, scheduling searches, and setting up alerts. Ben will then cover how to set up dashboards and monitors, and how to use our advanced analytics functionality called Log Reduce. We'll then wrap it up with a quick summary and our Q&A session. So let's get started with Sumo Logic's value proposition. There are two important facts when it comes to machine data. One, your IT environment is generating a massive amount of machine data. And two, there is enormous value hidden in that data. Both of those drive the need for Sumo Logic and our core value proposition, which is to enable you to easily extract value and insight from the massive amount of machine data your IT environment generates. Many of you know this, as you've already signed up for Sumo Free. To take it one level deeper, what it means for those of you that are responsible for application development or application management is the ability to rapidly troubleshoot errors and exceptions, determine root causes of failure, and resolve application issues. For those of you in IT operations, it means the ability to monitor and alert on your infrastructure in real time. For those of you that are IT and business executives, it means the ability to visualize your data and make critical decisions from the freshest set of data. So now that we've covered the core value proposition of Sumo Logic and what it means for you, let's discuss our high-level deployment architecture. There are three aspects, or quote-unquote components, to Sumo Logic: our collectors, our service, and our web-based application. Let's discuss each in more detail. First, our collectors. As the name would indicate, collectors are the mechanism by which logs are collected. A collector is a lightweight Java application that collects unstructured data, compresses it, encrypts it, caches it, and ultimately transmits it to the Sumo Logic service. Collectors can be deployed locally or remotely, and can also be baked into an AMI if you have a deployment in AWS. It supports Linux, Unix, Windows, Solaris, and Mac, and can collect from multiple data sources, including local or remote file tail, syslog TCP or UDP, Windows events, or from executing a script at defined intervals. Second, the Sumo Logic service. Logs are sent to the Sumo Logic service, which is a 100% cloud-based service. This is where all data is indexed, stored, and analyzed, and also from a security perspective, where all customer data is isolated and stored encrypted. The last piece, the web-based application, is the interface for all customer functionality. This includes all setups, including collector download, activation, and management. So in a nutshell, collectors are our secure and reliable transmission mechanism to send data to the Sumo Logic service, which is where data is indexed, isolated, and stored encrypted. And then lastly, all customer interaction is through the web-based application. Now that we've covered the high-level architecture, let's jump into the web-based application, and I'll hand it off to Ben from here.
Thanks, Praveen. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to start from the very beginning, and we're going to start from actually receiving the email, and we're going to log in, and then we're going to just go ahead and set up some sample searches and just get you going, and then answer any of your questions at the end. So let's go ahead and share out my desktop here. There we go. All right, so I've already received an email. Basically, this is the email you should have received when you signed up. So the first time you log in, you have to change your password. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get in there. Okay, so basically this is where you get started. You can see some things like installation guides, getting started guide, and I definitely recommend you go in there and look at that, and as well as our online documentation. You can see it up at the help here. There's some really good things there, as well as on our support side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the get started side. And what we're going to do is we're going to install some collectors. So just a couple things I mentioned when you're thinking about this. So you need to think about where is the data that you want to collect and how you want to get that data to our collectors. So we can install collectors on individual servers, and you can also do different types of remote collection to be able to pull that in to one server and things like WMI on Windows or syslog. So you have a few different choices, but you want to make sure you understand where that data is. Now in this case, we want to go ahead and install a local collector. Now you can see the platforms we support there, so across Unix, Mac, Linux, and Windows. So I've already downloaded one onto Windows and Linux. So let's start with on the Linux side, and let's get that started. So we have a script collector here. You see it's just going to get the collector set up, and we'll get that one started, and we'll go and start the installation on Windows as well. Okay, so we just have to accept the conditions. Now, there are also completely automated ways to install on Linux. You don't have to actually do it this way. You can do it through RPM, or you can use a tarball as well and have a completely unattended installation. But just for the sake of this effort here, we're going to do it, just go through it manually. Okay, so we're going to accept that agreement. By default, we install an Sumo collector. Now, both on Windows and Linux, you can, on Linux you can declare it, and Unix you can install it as root. If you don't want to install it as root, just make sure that whatever user you use has access to the logs that you want to look at. As well as on Windows, you need to make sure that the user you would use there has access as well. So we're going to start that up. Now let's just let that go while we go over to a Windows server that I have up and running. So same kind of idea here. We're going to accept the license agreement, install some program files, Sumo Logic collector, and we'll let that create that. Now, again, here, like I said, this one runs as administrator by default, but if you set up as another user, just make sure that user has access to the correct log. Now, once this installs, what it's going to do, and it takes a couple seconds here, it's going to connect to the Sumo Logic service. Now, what this means is that all communication with our collectors is through HTTP over SSL, so HTTPS. And so the first time that you set up a collector, what it's going to do is it's going to try to connect to our service and register itself. So here we see, I'm just going to let it take the default sources here. I'll add another one in a minute, but I'm going to take the Windows log. And then right now, like I said, it's going to try to go over HTTPS to the Sumo Logic Cloud, and then basically give us an activation key that we can use. Now, while that's running, let's go over and just check on our Linux install here. So we see we have the same kind of deal where I can just say I want to do system logs, and I definitely recommend that. Even if, say, you're only looking at your web server, being able to understand what's going on in your system as your application, your web server is having problems is very important because it could be related. Now, here's the same thing. It's going to try to connect to the Sumo Logic service. And there we go on Windows. So we can see that it's given us this 5-letter code. So we're going to take that, and now we're going to go back to the GUI where we had started, and we're going to then put in a activation code here. Just a second, I didn't get that right. Come back there. And now I think we got it. go. Now I'm going to name this Windows selector. Now what it's doing now is it's actually activating on the system. Now we do have ways to do this in a completely unattended way, and that's something we have in our documentation, and you can ask us about that through the support site. Now, what we can also do is I want to set up and monitor my IIS server. Now this was set up as IIS, and there we can see when you set up your Sumo Logic free account, when you register Linux, Windows, and Mac, it will automatically create you a default Windows dashboard. We'll take a look at that later. So I'm going to set up an IIS server. Now I'm going to go back here. Now where your IIS server keeps its logs, and this may be different for you, but in our case, it's in this directory here. I'm going to copy that address, and I'm going to bring that back over here. Now, in this case, I'm going to do start.log. So you can see that you can basically use the start annotation to collect more than one log tag. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but in many cases, if your logs are being rotated or you have a lot of different logs that you might want to look at in a single directory, you can use the star format to do that. Now I could also put in the host name if I'd like. That could be another way to distinguish. And very importantly, you want to use the source category as a way to distinguish. And I'll show you how to search against this. So this is one of the ways you can distinguish your data. So for example, I could search across all of my web servers in my environment. Now, next, you can, one of the most important things to think about is your time zone. So Sumo Logic can read time zone automatically from log files, but very often, particularly say with IIS and a couple other different log files, that may not be present. So I'm going to make sure I know that my server is running in UTC. So just in case that's not in there, I'm going to make sure that I set that. And now I'll go next, and that's going to register that collector. Okay. Now, before we go ahead, let's go ahead and add our Linux collector as well. And let's see, activate collector. Let's go back to our Linux system here and see we have that same type of code. Now, in case with both of these systems, both Windows and any of our collector installations, if you accidentally press enter and lose that code, that is actually installed in the installation directory, so you can go back and get that at a later time, and that exact location is within our support document. Okay, so I'm activating this Linux collector. Now what I'm going to do here as well, I want to add another source because we can kind of have some parity here. So I'm going to add another local file just to show you how to be done here. And in this case, now we see I also got my default Linux dashboard. So I'm going to add my Apache log. And that is going to be an SC httpd/logs and then star logs in this case. Log. Now in this case, I'm going to name this web as well, just so I can have some parity here. So in case I want to look across all my web systems, now just like I did before, I want to select the time zone. And then we're going to save. And now we have an Apache collector as well. So you can see there that it's registered along the other ones. Okay, so now we've got some collectors set up. Let's talk a little bit about the system and what the different tabs mean here. So first of all, once you've got your data coming in, one of the most important things to do is just check on the status of those collectors. So here we can see on top, I can see my total message volume. Here I can see the Windows collector, and in a minute or so we'll see the Linux collector come up as well as data comes in there. And this is a good way to make sure that your data is coming in. So if you set up a collector and you're not seeing any data coming in here after a few minutes, then you definitely may have a problem in terms of maybe your user doesn't have access, you didn't set up the directory correct, and so you want to go and check on that. You've already seen the collectors tab. In the users tab here, you can add new users to give other people access to the account when you're working on this together. And then finally, on the account tab, there's a couple things. First of all, you can see how much data you've been using and basically what your retention is and what you're allowed to do. I see my user here. And then importantly here, I can actually set a timeout. So if you're working on this and you're looking away for a little bit, very often I set that to something a little bit longer than 15 minutes, so it doesn't time out on me. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our search here. So if we, just right off the top, I could take and just, start. I just want to look at all the data coming in right now. So what that star is doing is pulling in any data that I'm collecting over the last 15 minutes. So you can see, our search window here. Over here, we can set the time. So I can say I want to look over, say, the last 15 minutes, last 16 minutes, like 6 hours. And there's a lot of, you can even select specific times and specific dates. And that's all within our documentation. But here I can see, okay, I've got a bunch of Windows events, things going on here. Now, as you start to look at your data, what I find is one of the most useful ways to get a sense of what's going on is using something that Praveen had mentioned earlier, and it's our feature called Log Reduce. Now, if I click on this nice big blue button here, what this is going to do is it's going to put the summarize operator in there, and it's going to take and look at all that data, and it's going to start to look for patterns within that data. So this is a really good way to get a sense of what kind of data you've got going on in your environment. So if we kind of scroll down here, I can see I've got a bunch of Windows PowerShell commands here from the event log, some more PowerShell here. You can continue to see that I've got some, a service was installed in the system, so we actually see the event of the Sumo Logic collector was installed. Here I can see that the application experience service was started up, and I see as well some other things. Now, what I can do at this point, this is giving me a good idea of what's going on right now. These are mostly Windows events. So what I want to do is I want to then take and pull some of that information out. So if we take, and I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to say, if we look back at the different things we got running here, so I'm going to take this local Windows event, so I'm going to use this source category that we talked about, and I'm going to say source category equals, and now in this case, instead of me having to write out the entire thing, I'm going to do star Windows star. Okay, now if I ring that really quickly, that's going to show me just the Windows event. Now what I want to do is I want to pull out the event identifier. So a real easy way to do this as you're learning is I can just take this text right here, and a nice little pop-up will come up here, and I can parse that selected text. And so once that little window comes up, I can select that I want to extract this value, and I'm going to call that event ID. Okay. Now I'm going to go over a little longer time frame so we have a little more data here for the last 3 hours. So even though I just installed the collector, it collected all the previous data as well. Okay, now we can see that it's pulling out the event IDs. Now maybe what I want to do is I want to know how often certain event IDs are happening. So in this case, I can pull up another very useful operator called count. So I can do count by event ID, and then I want to sort, so I want to know what events are happening the most. So what happens when you do this count, it automatically creates a new variable called underscore count. So I'm going to sort by that. Okay, now what it's doing is it's going and counting by those event IDs, and it's created basically this new aggregate tab. So this is, as you start doing searches, you'll find that the aggregate tab, doing aggregates like this is one of the most useful ways to look at your data to start getting some meaning out of it. So here, I can start to do some graphs. So maybe I want to look at it as a sidebar graph here, so I can see that, I have the 600 events. I can see I'm running 36 of them, and I can go down and I can look at each different type of event. And I can look at that as, a typical bar graph here. Now, what I also might want to do is I might want to look at the proportions of those events. So we got this nice time chart here, so I can see that, obviously this event ID 600 is the lion's share of those events. Now, as you start to experiment with this, and we have great documentation on this, you can start to put this into time buckets and see how many different events you have over time. You can start to do more complicated graphs. So I definitely encourage you to do that and look at some of our other materials. So at this point, I think we can take some questions and see if there's anything else. And I'm going to hand it back over to Praveen.
Thank you, Ben, for a great hands-on overview of Sumo Logic. Now that you all know a bit more about Sumo Logic, let me quickly cover the 4 major differentiators to our solution before our Q&A session. First, operational ease. Sumo Logic is a 100% cloud-based solution with 0 operational overhead for our customers and no hardware or storage to deploy or manage. Second, scalability. Sumo Logic offers seamless scalability for enterprises of all sizes. Our customers don't need to take any action as their data volume grows. We handle it all. Third, advanced analytics. Sumo Logic is the only solution to offer log reduce, which sifts through the noise of log data and is able to distill hundreds of thousands of rows of log lines into a meaningful set of patterns that customers instantly derive insights from. Fourth, low TCO. Our service is a single cost, with no additional fee for maintenance, hardware, storage, or professional services. In addition, we offer easy support for data spikes and bursts due to seasonality. Whether you are a retailer in the holiday season, a flower seller during Valentine's Day, or a company driving traffic to your website from a Super Bowl commercial. With Sumo Logic, you don't have to overbuild internal infrastructure to support the maximum load. Now that we've covered that, to learn more about Sumo Logic Free, visit our support page at support.sumologic.com/home or our Sumo Logic Free features page at sumologic.com/product/Sumo Logic Free. And for any questions after the webinar, please send them to webinars@sumologic.com. Now on to the Q&A. Okay, we have a couple of emails coming in, or a couple of questions coming in. The first is, am I able to collect my logs remotely?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we have a couple different ways of doing that, but the simple answer is yes. You can collect those remotely through syslog. So for example, if you're collecting for network devices or Unix or Linux systems, that's a good way to do it. As well, you can connect over SSH. On Windows, you can do it through sharing out a file path through UNC paths, or you can do it through WMI. And we also have some other ways to do it through a scripted collector, where you can actually collect it by running a script to pull that in as well through an API.
Okay, we have another question coming in, which is, how do you create an alert?
Okay, so the way to do that is when you look at a search, when you save that search, so you can take any search and save that search. When you save that search, you can actually have the search run on a regular basis. So anything from a few minutes to every hour, every day. And then when that runs, you can tell based on certain conditions within your search, say, if you find any messages that look like this, or I get a number of 404 errors that are more than a certain amount, then you send me an alert to this email address or run this script.
Excellent. Another question, for the Linux RPM package, does it default in collecting the log for var log?
Yes, I believe it does.
Okay. Next question is, can I build a dashboard of graphs?
Absolutely. And so maybe we can switch in, we can actually show that. So why don't we, Praveen can hand control back to me, and let's show that real quick. I think that would be a good thing to show. Okay. So let's share my desktop again. Okay. So if we look back here to the graph that I've created, let's say that I want to add that to a dashboard. Now, if you don't have the default dashboard, this is the right way to create your first dashboard. But if you already have some dashboards and you want to create a new one, you go in here, you can type in a new dashboard name if you'd like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the default Windows one. There's already some columns built in. You can name your own column, so you can create a new column. And I'm going to call this Windows Events. Now, basically, now you can see this was the default dashboard that was already created. So I can see, service operations and services that have been stopped and started, event distribution, errors and warnings over time. Now, a couple of things to note. So our dashboards are basically processed in near real time with a technology we call continuous queries. And this is definitely something that means that you can have a continuous look at your environment. Now, part of that means is that the first time you create a dashboard, it's not going to show historical data. It's only going to show data going forward. So as you can see here, this Windows event, the Windows event graph that I created will populate over time. But once it's had time to populate, then this will automatically update, and as many people can look at this at the same time. It's not going to be regenerated for every person. You can share that dashboard out, in this case, by just putting up here and sharing out the dashboard. Yeah, and while we're in here, let's go ahead and show how to create that alert so you can actually see that. So if I click on Save As on the search here, and I can name this as a test, and what I can do is I can set this to run every 15 minutes, hourly, like I said. So I'm going to set this to every 15 minutes. Maybe I want to have that run over the last 15 minutes of data. And then, in this case, I want it to notify me if the groups here, I want to see if the number of alerts is greater than 100 is what this is basically going to do. In this one, I want it to email me at ben@sumologic.com. And so I'll get an email automatically giving me that data with the graph in it as well.
Okay, give us a few seconds as some more questions come in.
So the question was, can I pull summarized data from Sumo into my own database? Okay, so there's a couple ways to approach this. Number one, with any data that you have, you can actually go, if I go in here to messages, you can just go and export the results. Now, that's just a simple way to get it out there to CSV, but I think the true answer to what that question is we have an API, and that API allows you to run searches and pull out that data, and then that data is going to come out, it's a REST API, it's going to come out in a well-known JSON format, and then you can take that and put that into any destination you want. So we have several customers that are pulling out things from our API and building their own dashboards, putting into their own databases, things like that.
Great, thanks. It looks like that's all the questions that have come in. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope it was informative to you. Please feel free to follow up with us for any questions. We look forward to helping you out more and hopefully helping you getting a lot of value out of Sumo Logic free. Thanks very much and have a great rest of the day.